Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome back. I'm here to record the screencast for Module 2, in which we'll focus on motivation and emotion. And so these are the learning outcomes that we'll cover in the first screencast. We'll define the basic terminology related to goals, motivation, self-regulation, and self-control. We'll explain the antecedents and consequences of goal activation, and we'll describe the factors that influence motivation in the course of goal pursuit. Now, the psychology of motivation is concerned with the why of behavior. Why do we eat? Why do some of us strive to get ahead? Why do rich professional athletes compete in events such as the Olympics that have no substantial financial reward? These are some of the questions that the psychology of motivation is attempting to address. Now, when we talk about the definition of the terms related to motivation, we'll start with goals. So a goal is the cognitive representation of a desired state. So it's how we conceptualize it, how we represent it cognitively. And these goals facilitate responses that are compatible with our objectives, with the outcomes that we desire. And so these cognitive representations or goals are fundamental guides for human behavior. Now, goals can be of a personal form, so we could have personal goals, or we could have cultural goals. So those are consistent with the direction or the goals of the culture as a whole that we ascribe to, ones that we'd like to fulfill as well. Now, when we talk about motivation, now motivation is another important term because it is the impetus that gives purpose or direction to behavior, and it operates in humans at both a conscious and subconscious level. So they're both forms of motivation that are relevant, and they co-occur. So motivation, in other words, is the psychological driving force that enables action in the course of goal pursuit. Now, we can speak of discrete motives, right? So a motive is a hypothetical state, much like motivation is a hypothetical state, because it exists within an organism, and as I mentioned, it activates behavior. So when we speak of a motive or motivation, it's something that can't be seen, nor can it be measured directly. In fact, we infer a person's motives or motivation from their behaviors. We infer their motives or motivations from the behaviors that they perform. So motives stem from needs, from wants and desires that lead to goal-directed behavior. So they propel us to behave in ways that will help us fulfill or achieve those goals. Now, let's look at two forms of motivation. The first is intrinsic motivation. So this is an incentive to engage in a specific activity that derives from pleasure in the activity itself. So there's a genuine interest in a subject studied, for instance, rather than because of external benefits that might be obtained, such as money or course credits. So intrinsic motivation, in other words, is a motivation that stems from the benefits that are associated with the pursuit of a goal. And some of those benefits might be those of having a fulfilling experience. So for instance, students are studying a certain topic and they find that to be a fulfilling experience. It fulfills them to study this topic, to engage in this activity. Okay, so it's pursuing an activity for its own reward. It is self-rewarding to pursue that activity. You see this very often in people who perform or who are involved in volunteer work. Volunteer work is highly driven by intrinsic motivation because there is no external reward. There's no monetary compensation for their effort or the time that they invest in a certain activity. Okay, so that's intrinsic motivation, like studying or playing the piano or pursuing sports or any other activity, artistic activity that is engaged in for its own sake, for the sake of experiencing, having a fulfilling experience. With extrinsic motivation. So this is an important distinction to be drawn between internal motivating forces, as we saw in the previous slide, and external factors such as rewards and punishments that can encourage or discourage certain behaviors. So when a task is not intrinsically motivating or intrinsically fulfilling or intrinsically rewarding, then the person who is engaged in the task may be driven by an extrinsic incentive. And this extrinsic incentive in a specific activity can arise from the expectation of punishment or of reward. That means that the person is completing a disliked chore in exchange for payment is one form of an extrinsic motivation. So the person is not completing the task because it is intrinsically fulfilling. Rather, he or she is completing a task because they anticipate it will result in a gain and a reward, or it will result in the avoidance of a certain punishment, an aversive outcome, avoiding an aversive outcome. So that's another form of an extrinsic incentive. And when that occurs, one is driven by an extrinsic motivation. So now we're going to look at the antecedents of goal activation. So the antecedents of goal activation can be either conscious or non-conscious. So conscious describes when the person is fully aware of the contextual influences and resulting goal-directed behavior. Non-conscious is when motivation occurs outside of a person's awareness and leads to non-conscious goal pursuits. So this the non-conscious motivation can occur in response to a state of deprivation in which a need will arise. So people's biological makeups are quite similar. So we share similar physiological needs. And physiological needs are occasioned by the depletion of a vital substance such as food or water. So the depletion of food or water gives rise to a drive to replenish those substances. So needs give rise to drives. So the depletion of food, for instance, gives rise to the hunger drive. The depletion of water gives rise to the thirst drive. And these drives arouse us to take action. And they tend to be stronger when we've been deprived for a long time. So physiological drives are these unlearned drives with a biological basis, such as hunger, thirst, and avoidance for pain. And they can be a source of non-conscious motivation, an antecedent, a non-conscious antecedent of goal activation. Now let's talk about self-regulation. So self-regulation describes the control of one's behavior through the use of self-monitoring, which involves keeping a record of one's behavior, self-evaluation, which involves assessing the information obtained during self-monitoring, and self-reinforcement, which involves rewarding oneself for appropriate behavior or for attaining a goal. And so it is the processes through which individuals alter their emotions, desires, and actions in the course of pursuing a goal. So for instance, all these processes, these sub-processes that all are under fall under self-regulation. So they involve both self-monitoring, keeping track of one's behavior. So if a person is on a diet, have they adhered to the guidelines of their diet? Self-evaluation, so uh, assessing the information. So how much of a deviation was there from the guidelines? And self-reinforcement, rewarding oneself for appropriate behavior. All these operations have the effect of altering our emotions, our desires and actions in the course of pursuing a goal. So if someone is on a diet, it may shift their judgment around certain foods. So what they used to find rewarding, like chocolate or ice cream, now they may find aversive because it's no longer congruent, or it no longer aligns with their current goal. Or they may feel that fruits are far more rewarding, far more delicious than ice cream or chocolate or any other fattening food. They may find those, or vegetables, they may experience that vegetables are far more rewarding than any other foods that they previously craved, previously before their adherence to their diet. Okay, so self-regulation does have an effect of modifying our attitudes and our judgment around objects or things like food or situations or people that are related to our goals. So someone who wants to abstain from drinking alcohol, while they may no longer find bars very appealing, they may not want to go to bars anymore because they've really aligned their thinking, their mindset around this goal, and they now find things that they usually would find appealing and exciting, they now find them to be aversive. Okay, so now the next concept is that of self-control. So this is the ability to be in command of one's behavior, overt, covert, emotional, or physical, and to restrain or inhibit one's impulses. It's particularly relevant in circumstances in which short-term gain is pitted against long-term and greater gain, wherein self-control is the ability to opt for the long-term outcome. So this is the capacity to control impulses. So we may have a project to finish, but we have the impulse of going on social media. So it's the capacity to not to succumb to those impulses, which will take us away from our main target, our main goal. And so it's the capacity to inhibit, to control those impulses, desires, and actions in order to resist a temptation. So we may be tempted, for instance, to go out, safe to do so, to go out with friends on a Friday night, but we may be it may be incongruent with our goal of finishing a project for Monday morning. So we may, in fact, opt to forego the outing with our friends in order to experience the long term, the greater gain of completing our project and completing a project of high quality. The capacity to postpone reward in this situation can actually double the payout, and because we're foregoing the instant gratification, the instant reward of spending time with friends during an outing, we're foregoing that for the larger payout, larger but delayed payout of completing a high quality project. And that's indicative of willpower. It's indicative of having strong self-control. So again, it's the capacity to inhibit impulses, emotions, desires, and actions in order to resist the temptation for the immediate reward. So now we're switching to a different topic. We're going to talk about commitment. So commitment describes an obligation or devotion to a person, relationship, task, cause, or other entity of or action. The level of commitment stems from the sense that a goal is both valuable and attainable. And psychologists who have conducted research on this have defined one's commitment as the product of the value of the goal and the expectancy that it will be achieved. So one's commitment is influenced by both how valuable they consider the goal to be, but also how realistic it is for them to achieve this goal. Before we move on to the consequences of goal activation, I just want to reiterate that when we talked about self-control, again, I described it, it's an important description, is our capacity to control impulses, emotions, desires, and actions in order to resist a temptation. And we do so in order to protect a valued goal. So we resist all those temptations we may receive from others, from our environment. It comes in different forms. It could be the temptation to watch a television show or the temptation to go out, but we resist those because we protect our valued goal. So self-control is a great concept because it is actually self-regulation in contexts that involve a clear trade-off between long-term interests and some form of immediate gratification. So there's a trade-off between the immediate gratification of watching a television show or on Friday night or going out with friends and the long-term interest of devoting or being committed to one's valued goal of completing a project of high quality. Okay, so self-control again is a form of self-regulation. It's self-regulation in contexts that involve a clear trade-off between long-term interests and some form of immediate gratification. Okay, now I talked about commitment. We're going to talk about the consequences of goal activation. So the activation of a goal does increase motivation. So when we activate a goal, that's again the cognitive representation of a desirable or desired outcome, that increases motivation, and motivational states influence our perception, our judgment, and our feelings. So for instance, if one is experiencing a thirst drive, well, they're going to evaluate a glass of water much more positively when than when they're not thirsty. Okay, so the objects that meet our goals take on greater value. So again, the activation of a goal and the accompanying increase in motivation influences our perception, our judgment, and our feelings about everything around us in our environment. So when you are pursuing a goal of quenching your thirst, you're thirsty, you're at the college or at your house, you evaluate goal relevant objects. So these are goal relevant objects are going to meet your goal of quenching your thirst. You're going to evaluate a glass more positively than objects that are not relevant to the goal, like a cell phone, for instance. So a glass of water will be far more valuable when you're in pursuit of quenching your thirst than a cell phone. Okay, so now we're going to move to self-regulation and goal pursuit. So self-regulation refers to the processes through which individuals alter their perceptions, feelings, and actions in pursuit of a goal. So this is how we alter our psychology, our psyche, so our perception, our feelings, and our actions in pursuit of a goal. So for again, the example of of a diet, someone having trying to stick to their diet, but they eat part of the cookie when in fact they should have avoided this. It's not congruent with their goal. So let's talk about the important processes involved in self-regulation. The first is the deliberative phase. So again, just to repeat, self-regulation involves two basic stages, and these are associated with two distinct mindsets. The first is a deliberative phase. So here is deciding which of many potential goals to pursue at a given point in time. So you may want to manage your time better, you may want to get fit, or you may want to learn a new language, but which of these many potential goals will you devote your time and your energy to? Okay, so that's the deliberative phase. The second one is the implemental phase. So the implemental phase is when you plan specific actions related to the selected goal. So you have to set time aside in order to pursue those goals. You have to set time aside and articulate, write down which actions will move you towards the goal. So there's a certain distance, a gap between one's current state and the state that they'll achieve when they've met that goal. In order to bridge that gap, what actions does one need to take? And that takes time. You have to carve out time in your schedule in order to carry out those actions. So being fit, that's a state that one may want to achieve. So they have to carve out time and engage in certain physical activities, whether it's walking, running, playing a sport, or whatnot. Okay, so it does require that implemental phase where specific actions are planned in order to achieve a goal. Okay, that's the first part.